do this afternoon's workshop, and a workshop doesn't ever quite feel quite the right way of describing it when it's on Zoom. I don't know why. Workshop always feels like it should be in the real world. But anyway, welcome. Today we are going to look at the deliberate choice and why meditation may have been ruining your life or holding you back in life, which is quite a statement after having spent the last 12 months teaching meditation online, I appreciate. But it will all make a lot of sense by the time we get to the end of it. And my hope for this is that, one, you'll find it interesting, and that two, by the end of it, it will give you a few ideas, a few thoughts that you can then put into action and use to help benefit your everyday life. If there's any questions along the way, do feel free to ask, and we shall begin, first of all, just with a little bit of relaxation, I think, just to relax into things and just get ourselves in a good place. So to start off with, have a fidget, get comfortable. And we'll begin by just taking 3 nice deep breaths together. No need to close your eyes until the third breath, when you can close your eyes and just relax. So let's take first deep breath in together, holding that, and then just slowly release. Taking a second deep breath in, hold again, and again just gently releasing, letting go. Taking a third wonderful deep breath in, holding that breath, and then just releasing that and just allowing your eyes to close. So just go within for a moment. Just allowing yourself to take a few moments to create a space between where you have been and where you are arriving now. A little bit of space between the morning, the afternoon, and the time that you can spend now learning, relaxing, enjoying. And I want you to become aware of that place within you that feels just most comfortable, wherever that is. And I don't know where that feeling of comfort starts for you, but wherever that is, just allow that feeling now to slowly start to spin within you, to flow within you, relaxing, soothing, comforting. Just letting go. And there's a part of your mind that's that part of you that's always learning, always discovering. It's that part of you that learned how to walk, learned how to open a door, learned how to use a knife and fork. And it's that part of you that can step forward and start to learn, accessing all the resources that you have to make the most out of this session today. As you just relax, drift and float. And you can realize that learning can be easy, taking things on board, because you don't always have to consciously be aware of everything that's going in, every detail, every word, because the unconscious mind, that super powerful part of you, is seeing all, is hearing all. And you will find that you can access in the future those parts of this learning today that are most beneficial to you in the future, at any time, easily and effortlessly. That's right. In a moment, I'll count from 1 to 3, and 3, you can open your eyes, ready to dive into this today. Feeling good. That's 1, coming back. 2, feeling a tingle of energy, ready to begin. And 3, nice deep breath, back with us. That's it. Wonderful. So I'm going to start today by just reflecting and talking a little bit about things like worry and stress and emotional pain and suffering. Those, when we relive things that have happened to us in the past with that same kind of emotional intensity as when we experienced them in the past. And we learn ways and we develop ways that keep these feelings alive. We develop ways and habits of thinking that a little bit like the dial on a guitar amplifier. I have to say guitar amplifier because I play guitar. We can turn them up, we can turn them down. And sometimes we discover and create really good habits and good ways of managing those things that happened to us in the past. For instance, some people, if they witness something kind of like a really bad accident, have a way of distancing themselves from it and separating themselves out from it. So they can talk about it, but it doesn't bother them emotionally. And other people just have not learned how to do that yet. So what I want you to do is, when you think about, and throughout this, in fact, I'd like you to pick something that you either worry about. Yeah, let's go with worry, because that's a nice general one. Pick something that you find yourself worrying about, that you come back to. Not like a one-off worry, but something that reoccurs. And what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment, I'm going to open up a breakout room, is to not talk in any, you don't have to talk any great detail or depth about what that thing is that you worry about or that you keep coming back to and worrying about. What I want you to do is share with each other the process of how you worry. So imagine you're kind of almost teaching the other person how you worry. So for instance, I was speaking to somebody the other day who was struggling sleeping, and they would wake up in the night, and I asked them to teach me how to do that. Didn't need to know what was on their mind or whatever, but just to teach me. So they say, well, they would wake up and they would get a drink, and then they would start their mind roaming around different things, and then this thing would come into their mind, and then they would start focusing on that thing until they got to the point where they felt really alert and awake and anxious because they were worrying about it so much. So it's the process that you use to worry about something that I want you to kind of share with each other. And be aware, focus, become aware of any similarities, any similar techniques that you use for worrying. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Good. In that case, I'm going to do a breakout room for the two of you, and we'll take about, where are we at? Let's take about, this is just the two of you. Should we say 8 minutes? Does that sound good? About 4, 5, yeah, 4, let's say 10 minutes, 5 minutes each, to kind of just think about and share about your process of worrying. Not what you worry about, but your actual process of worrying when you are worrying about that thing. Okie doke. Here you go. See you in a minute. So, I mean, throughout that discussion, and it can be, when it's a process, and also I could hear, and like Sally said, when we're worrying, or when we're focusing in on whether it's past pains or current stuff, or worrying about stuff that may or may not happen, when we're really involved in it, when we're in that habitual way of thinking, it can be quite difficult, I think, as you found, to kind of pull out the actual process of what we're doing that keeps that worrying going. But each one of you, as I was listening, I was listening for the common thread. I was kind of hoping it was going to be there, and it was. The common thread is there is the initial start point. There's that thought or that idea that enters into the mind, and then some part of our mind latches onto it, and it starts going through it and repeating it and repeating it. I think Sally said about kind of things spiraling and spiraling.
Yeah.
And we become very focused on it. And whether that's picturing it, imagining it in our minds, or whether we're having that inner dialogue, that inner conversation, telling ourselves, but what if this, what if that, and oh, this could happen, that could happen. However we do it, we start usually replaying scenarios, rerunning scenarios over and over again, focusing in on that one idea and allowing it to expand out. So moving on from that, back in. Got Sally's twin in now, Sally Cook and Sally Cook. I'll wait for Sally to connect on that one. Are you still hearing on that other one, Sally?
Yeah.
That's all right, then I'll carry on. So moving on from that idea, that process of worrying, that hooking onto one idea, one thought, and then running with it until it becomes the big whole focus. I won't bother with breakout rooms for this. We'll just talk. I'm going to ask you a question, one of which I'm sure you'll all be able to answer. What is meditation? What is meditation? Just chip in with your view, thought.
Relaxation.
Okay, relaxation.
In some ways, it's guiding my thoughts.
Okay, yeah.
Rather than like not having any thoughts, because you do.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of worrying.
So I like that, actually. Yeah. It's, so that's kind of some of what it is. And now, and I remember when I first put this workshop up, Sally said, hang on a minute, you've been teaching us meditation for 12 months. Why are you saying us now that meditation might be ruining our lives? This is why. Think about the process of meditation. If you're working with a mantra, if you're working with an image, or maybe you're using a candle flame, or even if you go back to the very first I Meditate lessons, when it was literally about just focusing on the breath, the purpose and the aim of that practice is for that single focus to be all that you focus on. And if we take that process of single-minded focus on one thing, what's that happens when you're worrying?
Oh, yeah.
When we're worrying, when we're stressing, when we have that single idea that's running around and around in our heads. And in fact, one of the techniques suggested, I think, over the last 12 months is to, if there's a thought that's going in your head, like, oh, I've got to do this later, make that your meditation and make it completely. And when we're stressing, when we're worrying, we're entering into a state of meditation on a single idea. But because we were in the habit, and we build the habit of worrying, because it becomes automatic, it's not a deliberate choice, it just happens. we focus on that thing, and we're basically meditating on it. It becomes, or certainly can become, and it's most intense, all consuming, overwhelming, that single focus. So when we're worrying, we're actually meditating really well. The only problem is our point of focus is not one that's beneficial for us. And the deliberate choice is starting to become aware of when that's happening and changing the point of focus, because where attention goes, energy flows. I completely 100% believe that. And if you're focusing on something, you're going to get more and more of it. So if you start worrying about whether something bad's going to happen when you're crossing a road, for instance, just out the first thing top of my head, if you start focusing on that idea of what if something happens, it becomes a meditation. It becomes like a mantra, and you unpick it. You know, the meditation part, one of the blessings that meditation gives us is that ability to focus on ourselves and who we are in our experience, and slowly peel back the layers of who we are, spiraling within. But when we're stressing, when we're worrying, we're using that same process. We're using that single focus upon that single thing, and we start, rather than peeling it apart to look within, we start spinning it out so as to understand how many more things about this we can worry about, how many more things we can start stressing and worrying about, connected to that initial one idea, to the point where it does feel out of control, and it can be overwhelming, and it can really affect our lives. But that's the way that meditation can be detrimental to our lives, because it's something we do naturally. But in that situation, that focus, that single focus, we need to start to become aware of it, to start transforming our experiences. And I know I've mentioned this in different sessions in the past, but I'll go over again. We have, within the mind, we have the reticular activating system, which I will refer to as RAS from now on, just because for some unknown reason, when I say reticular activating system too many times, I start tripping over it and I get all tongue-tied on it. So this RAS, this system, is a part of our mind that is there to basically reinforce and help reinforce our concept of who we think we are and our reality. They did, and I know I've mentioned this in the past, but there was experiments done where they took a group of people who thought nothing good ever happened to them. They worried, the bad stuff happened to them all the time. And they took a group of people who thought good stuff happened all the time. And they sent them off down, and I think the experiment was they had to walk down a pathway or a corridor. No one knew what the experiment was other than just walk down there. And literally without fail, all the people that always thought bad stuff happened got to the other end and single-handedly missed the big stack of notes of money that had been left on the floor, because their reticulative acting, see, I said if I tried to say I'd trip over, their RAS would only focus in on backing up the idea that nothing good ever happened to them. So even though there was a wodge of notes there, this part of the brain goes, I'm going to ignore that because nothing good ever happens to me. However, the group of people who believe good things happen to them, they carried on down that corridor, and without fail, every one of them found the money, because their RAS is focusing in on the fact that when they are out and about, good things happen to them. So their mind will have gone, oh, there's some money. Oh, I'll let you know about that because good things happen to you. You're a person that has good luck. And so they found the money. And so when we're worrying, when our mind's focusing in on all those bad things that could happen, all those stresses and those pressures, we're actually training that part of our mind to find more evidence to back up that thing we're worrying about and stressing. So not only are we meditating by habit upon that worry, upon that idea, we're also training part of our mind to go and find the evidence to back up those worries and those stresses. So for instance, with crossing the road, if you're worrying and stressing that something bad might happen if ever you cross a certain road because it's really busy, then your mind will pick out every news article about every bad thing that ever happened on that road. Or if somebody says, oh, I had a near miss on that road the other day, your mind will take notice of it. Whereas if you believe that you could cross that road whenever you want and be perfectly fine, and as long as you were being sensible, you'd be okay, then that part of your mind is then focusing in on the things you hear about people being okay on that road. So you'll hear somebody go, oh, I was driving down the such and such a road the other day. Yeah, really good. Really, it was nice and quiet. And somebody will say, oh, my kids crossed that road the other day. Yeah, no, they did really well. They were fine, found it easy. It's the same road, it's the same situation, but because we're worrying about it, because we're basically worrying is it's almost like negative meditation. We're meditating on the idea that something bad's going to happen, and we're expanding it and we're fueling it with our imaginations. That part of our mind is then going to be looking for the things that back up that, and it becomes this big stress.
It's a bit like negativity.
Yeah, it ties in very much with that. And the deliberate choice is to start now realizing that you can be aware of when you enter that thinking, and you can change your focus on that thinking. So what I want to do is to share one technique, one method by which we can take those worries, those ideas, and change how we feel about it, how we relate to it, and thus breaking that cycle of kind of automatic negative meditation. So, like I say, the thing is to be able to consciously choose, there's the squeaky seat, to be able to consciously choose not to focus so hard, so much on that, and to realize when it's happening and having ways of breaking that pattern. And meditation, learning to consciously meditate is one of the best ways of doing that, because in doing so, you'll become naturally, without trying, more aware of your own internal processes. So you tend to find when you take up meditation that you do notice when you're entering into a time of negative thinking for a while, or you become more aware when something might, and if you're, like I think Sally said, once you start being able to become aware of it, then you take more control of it. And that again is the deliberate choice. It's becoming aware of it. So this is I like that. I use this quite a lot when I'm working with people. So I'm going to take you through this, but I don't just want to talk you through it. I actually want to take you through it. So I imagine, because we're human, we probably all have something at the moment that we are possibly potentially worrying about. Would we all agree? Give me a wave if you've all got something. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to ask you to go into it or talk about it or anything like that. The beauty of this is we don't need to. When you think about that thing which you're worrying about, how is it that you are representing that? Is it what are the images that come to mind when you're doing that? Again, I'm not going to ask you to, because we're recording, I'm not going to ask you to say what they are. But once you've got an idea of the images and how you're representing that, so I'm going to use the road example because that's what I used last. So if I was worrying about having to cross a certain road regularly, I might be picturing being stuck in the middle of that road with a big lorry thundering down the middle of it or something. That might be the image that comes to my mind when I think about that worry. So if once you've got that image and kind of follow that worry to the point where you have quite an intense image that represents that worrying. And when you've got that, again, just give me a little wave to the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yourself, Anne?
I think I've got one.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's cool. So what I'm going to invite you to do now is just take a nice deep breath in and just close your eyes a moment. And just be with that image. Now, the first step in this is to notice where you are in relation to it. When you're thinking about that worry, are you imagining yourself actually standing in that event, in that moment, as though it's happening now and you're part of it? Are you watching it as though you're there, but watching yourself in that? Or is it like you're watching it on a screen somewhere? Now, the likelihood is, if it's an intense worry, if the feeling is quite strong, it's more likely going to be one of the first two. You're either going to be imagining yourself as though it's happening to you when you're worrying about it, or you're going to be imagining that you're there watching it happen, but you're still kind of connected to it. So what I want you first of all to do, and if I was to ask you just on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being it's a really, really, really big worry and just thinking about it stresses me out. 1 being, yeah, I need to be aware of it, but it's no hassle. On a scale of 1 to 10, just shout out for me where you'd say you were on that scale in relation to that worry at the moment.
9.
Is that a 9?
Yeah.
Yeah.
5.
5.
About a 6.
About a 6. Okay.
Fairly tired still.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got those. They're just a rough guide, so we know. So what I want you to do, I don't know just at this moment how it is you're perceiving that, whether you see yourself in it or whether you see yourself as part of the scene of the worry, but just not directly there. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine now that you're sat at a cinema. Just think about it. Think about being sat at the cinema. And then see that worry as though it's being projected onto the screen in front of you. Just pay attention about how that worry feels when you're just watching it over there. And now what I invite you to do is to imagine you're stepping up out of yourself, leaving your body there, and you go and sit down next to you. So you're now watching you, watching that worry. Just pay attention to how that feels. Thinking back to those numbers you gave before, notice any difference that you may feel. And I want you to think about that worry and let whatever that image is on the screen that you're watching you watch on the screen, freeze it at a point where it's most intense. Where that worry, when that's on that screen, is most intense. And as you're observing that, does the screen seem close up and large? Or is it further away? Just shout out whichever.
Further away.
Further away, close up, okay.
Large.
Large, okay. So what I want you to do, first of all, experiment with how this feels. For those that say it's closer up, push that screen further away. Make that screen, if it's the size of a cinema, make it the size of just a flat screen TV. And notice how your feelings connected to that worry change. If it's further away, experiment. See how it feels if you bring it closer. But if that feels less comfortable, make it even smaller still. Until you notice that shift. And as you're sat there, watching you watch that screen, is that scene, that image, is that in color or is that in black and white? Just let me know.
Black and white.
Okay.
Right.
Yep. So what I want you to do now, see what happens to it if you add a little bit of color. Maybe some cheerful colors, some lighter colors, some brighter colors. Notice how that feels. Does that feel better and easier?
Yeah.
Yeah? Wonderful. So now what I want you to do, you've got that image on that screen. It's now in color. It's further away or closer, depending. Now what I want you to do is to take notice of whether it's dark or whether it's bright. And if it's bright, tone it down, fade it out a little bit. Notice how that feels. Alternatively, if it's a bit faded and dull, you're struggling to see it, brighten it and see if that feels better, or whether it feels not so good, in which case darken it even more. Just adjust that image, its brightness, so that it feels even more comfortable. And now I want you to imagine some sort of music over the top of it, some sort of, like, either, I don't know, maybe either some sort of like crazy cartoon music or some sort of music that just makes it feel better for you, playing over the top of that scene. When you've done that, just let me know with a yes.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yep.
And just check in with how that feels now. Having changed that image. And then just drift back into yourself, watching that. See how that feels now. If that feels less of a worry, just say yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Now from that position there, you can even have a choice. You could move that screen even further away to the point that it does not bother you. But that would be a deliberate choice. Realizing that you can change and move those images that represent your worries. And by changing the way you experience and see them, you can realize and discover new ways of dissipating worry letting go of stress, by making the deliberate choice to take control of that meditation. Because meditation is a wonderful and powerful tool that you can use to change your life, to change your thinking. Now there's one last choice to make. Some things we have to keep in mind. We don't have to worry about them, but we do have to keep them in mind because we just need to be mindful of them. Not in any sort of big way, just there. And if whatever that worry was for you is something that you need to just keep in mind, but not be bothered by, then just keep that screen on, keep that theatre projector on. However, if that worry is something you now realize you do not have to worry about, and if you were to forget it tomorrow, today, or even in a moment, it would make no difference and life would be better. If it's that kind of worry, just switch that screen off. And when that's done, just let me know with a yes.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I know what to do.
I'll just leave it where it is for now, but know that you can go and switch it off when you realize that you can. And if you realize that you just need to have it in mind, then you can just leave it on dim all the way over there. So you don't quite forget it, but it doesn't bother you anymore. And what I want you to do now as a final part of this is to, now that you're back in your body, step up in that cinema, step up into that screen and stand beside it. Notice how that feels now. And then step into that screen. Notice how different that feels. Just that idea. And if I were to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, where's that worry now?
1.
A 1. Wonderful.
2.
2. Wonderful. Fabulous. And then when you're ready, just take a nice deep breath in. As you breathe out, you can open your eyes, and I want you to just give yourself a bit of a shake. Just break that state. Feel good. That's it. That's wonderful. And it's a really good way. Sometimes just noticing you're starting to stress, just doing something very physical like giving your body a shake can actually stop that process there and then for you. But this set techniques, and this is partly why I've recorded it, so you can go back and watch it again and again to learn the different phases, and is a wonderful way of taking control of that as you become more aware from this moment forward of those times when you start that stress meditation. But by being more aware of that, and now by having some tools and techniques where you can take control of that meditation, that stressing, that worrying, and by changing it, take control of it and lessen it. And that is the deliberate choice. The deliberate choice is to be aware of and to allow yourself to take control of those thoughts. And by taking that inner representation, having an image, and that image doesn't always have to be the thing you're worrying about. You know, if you're struggling for something, you just say to your mind, pop something into my head that that represents that thing I'm worrying about. Even better, ask it to pop something into your head that represents that thing you used to worry about, and you're already assuming it's going. And then when you've got that image, it could be anything. You can end up with a tomato. Maybe you change a tomato into a strawberry, which represents changing the inner representation of that thing you're worrying about. But keep changing the different levels of it. If you feel like you're right involved in it, push it away. If you feel like it's too bright and too bold, I always think of liken it to opening the curtains after a night out. You're like, oh, if it feels a bit like that, then turn down the light. If you kind of get it more in the sense of a sound, this was very visual, but if you kind of have sounds in your head, if it kind of almost feels and sounds like it's all too noisy, turn the volume down on that. But by making the deliberate choice, by starting now to become more aware and realize those times when that idea that leads to stress is planted, you can start taking more control of that. And in doing that, start taking control of those worries. Which is why, on one hand, as today's workshop title implied, meditation could have been ruining your life. Not consciously, not deliberately, and not the practice of meditation, but those times when you've been meditating on worries and thoughts and negative feelings that have then amplified. And you can now use the things that you've learned through meditation to also help improve your ability to take control now of those moments when that habitual negative meditation starts. And thus meditation is not affecting your life in a detrimental way. You're using it again to improve life. And whether it's pain, because if we have pain, we can focus in on pain and start amplifying it. And because, you know, it's that paper cut thing, you cut your finger on a bit of paper, you don't notice it, and then you notice you've cut your finger and suddenly it really hurts. And then you focus on it lots. Oh, it really hurts, and it seems to hurt even more, and then it starts throbbing. And it's like, but you didn't notice it until you noticed it. But then it becomes the thing you focus on, and your meditation then in that moment amplifies it. So if you're dealing with pain, you can use this same process to take control of those thoughts, those thinkings, and rather than meditating on how painful it is, you can meditate on changing the images of what that pain's represented by.
Yeah, make that pain smaller.
Yeah, make it smaller. You know, you can turn it up, turn it down. If it's bright angry red, you can change it to a nice soft pink. It's your mind. You can use it to really make those changes. The same with, you know, if you've had an event in your life that was traumatic, that haunts you, this same process, because what happens when we recall a past event that was traumatic is we tend to step into it, and if it really affects us, we're reliving it in our minds like we're doing it. Well, that's almost like a guided meditation, because the event isn't happening anymore. So you're creating the memory of the event like a guided meditation. So take control of that meditation, stop it, freeze it, change the way it looks, change the color of it, change the image. If it's bright and bold and colorful, make it dull and black and white and faded. Whatever you can do to that inner representation of that will transform that. And that again is the deliberate choice to take control of your worries, your fears, your sufferings, and to use the abilities that meditation and your mind gives you to make those changes. And in doing so, by making the deliberate choice, you're no longer just diving into single focus stress meditation. You're stepping into taking control of your inner world and making a big, big difference. Are there any questions about any of that for today? I mean, it's something you always think about and message me or whatever as well. But
got a question,
Hmm.
but it's sort of moving on from what we've just been talking about.
Okay.
So say one has past events which replay.
Yeah.
Somebody once said to me that you can change your past, that you can actually deliberately choose to believe that traumatic things didn't happen to you.
Hmm.
And I'm just curious as to how one would do that, and as to whether it's actually safe to do that.
Well, I was listening to where was it? This last week. Sometimes been busy week, so I'm a bit. My head's not recalling things. Chair. I was listening to a talk in the week, and they were talking about memories and how we can rewrite our memories. And in fact, every time you remember something that ever happened to you, you're rewriting your memories, because we don't hold on to perfect memory. There might be key points, but a lot of it, every time you revisit a memory, and this is kind of from neuroscience, every time you revisit a memory, your mind slightly rewrites it and alters it. So the memory you have now is not the exact way something happened. So, you know, if I focus it on a positive, if I have a day out that was just like a surprise and the best day out ever, every time I recall that day, my mind will be telling that story slightly different. And neuroscience now says the only way you can ever truly hold a true account of anything that ever happened to you is by never revisiting that memory. So based on that, every time you visit a memory or an occurrence from your past, your mind is slightly rewriting it, telling that story slightly differently, you might as well choose how you want that story to be. So that's the theory behind it. You can do that by, I mean, this set of techniques that we've just gone through today is a really quite a powerful one, and used kind of with the things with post-traumatic stress disorder to help. You never, whatever's happened to us in the past, something happened to us, but it's not really that moment in time that affects us now. It's how we relate to that when we think about it in the present. So by using techniques like the ones we've just used, you, I guess in a kind of clinical way of saying it, you're just desensitized. You create detachment. And at the beginning, I think I said it, maybe Sally, before you joined us, was that thing that some people can experience traumatic stuff and it seems to never bother them.
Yeah.
And other people, maybe even in the same instant, take something like, I don't know, a bus crash, horrific bus crash, and some people come away from it going, oh yeah, I was involved in a bus crash. Yeah, it wasn't good. And other people can't even think about it without shaking and kind of getting really emotional. And it's just that some people have learned ways of distancing themselves from traumatic stuff, and other people haven't. And so, like the techniques here, where you're altering how you represent it, it's a way of teaching yourself to distance yourself from it. I mean, if you're looking at, and have been looking at bits of NLP and stuff, the idea of detachment is very strong in that. And when in this technique that we've just looked at today, picturing, if you think about levels of detachment, when quite often, if we have an emotional attachment to a past event and we're imagining it and thinking about it, we see ourselves as though it's actually happening now in this moment. So, and we tend to put ourselves and associate ourselves as being in it now. So if you can change how you're representing that, how you're thinking about it, so you start imagining every time you think about it, making that effort to see it as though it's happening over there, whether it's, I mean, a theatre screen's a kind of a convenient, easy thing to imagine projecting it onto. But the moment you're projecting it somewhere else, or you imagine yourself stepping out of that, you're no longer associating and relating to it in the same way. So with this, when we did the sitting in the theatre, one, you distance yourself once by putting it on the screen, and then by stepping out of yourself, you're now disassociating yourself even further. So, you know, that's on the screen. Whatever happened, and it's happening on the screen. There's you watching it happen on the screen, and now you've stepped out of yourself. So you're now watching it on the screen, which almost makes it like somebody telling a third-hand story.
Yeah, so it's not happening to oneself anymore.
And what you tend to find is people that I know the guys that started NLP did a lot of looking at this and asking people, how is it you can deal with that thing that you went through? And they just go, well, when I think about it, I'm not there. I'm watching it, or it's happening over there. Whereas the people that were struggling with it would be like, it's here and it's happening to me now. So if you can set up, and like anything, it takes a little bit of work sometimes to get that shift. But with techniques like this, I mean, I think everyone, when we said, what's your number now? Your numbers had all come down.
Mm.
And that's in what, maybe 10 minutes. So if you imagine spending that 10 minutes every day with something, going through that same process, reinforcing that new way of looking at it, then after a week or so, you're going to be able to relate to that in an easier way. And making it easier isn't dismissing stuff. It's just making it so you can get on with life and not have it kind of weighing heavy or haunting you. Does that answer?
Yes and no. Because I'm like, because I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I can do the whole you know, like dialing down the image stuff. Yeah. But I just wondered whether it was safe to just reprogram my mind into believing that it never happened to me.
I don't think completely denying something happened to us is necessarily ever necessary.
Right.
Quite often when people come for hypnosis and therapy, can you help me forget this thing? In any situation in our lives, there's learning to be had. Whatever that was, there's usually some sort of learning, something that maybe because of whatever we've been through allows us to stay safer later on in life. And you don't want to forget certain signals, signposts, you know, something that happened when we were 10, we might recognize certain characteristics in another person that then makes us cautious of them and keep away from them in the future. That kind of thing, you don't want to necessarily forget. But what you want is, if you do think about it, to not have all the emotional pain or the trauma with it. And that's what these techniques do. They don't make you forget it, but they make it so if you do ever watch something on TV that reminds you of it, or read something in a book that reminds you of it, or somebody says something and it triggers a memory, rather than having all the well and swell of emotion that comes with that, you're detached from that. So you can say to yourself or whatever, yeah, this happened to me, or I experienced this, or I witnessed that, without the emotional weight behind it. And once you have that and you haven't got that emotional weight, any lessons that you've learned from that situation are not lost. But also that moment in your past is no longer affecting your present, which then means you can move forward.
Okay, I've now got another awkward question.
Okay, it's a Sunday afternoon.
Okay, so what about the situation where people kind of subconsciously put themselves in the same situation repeatedly
Yeah.
and somehow aren't learning that lesson from it, so that there isn't an alarm going off in their brain
Right.
going, oh, hang on a minute, this happened to us before and it wasn't good, so we need to do something so that it doesn't happen again.
Right.
Which is almost like the opposite, if you see what I mean.
So repeating a pattern of behavior that like always ends up in that same kind of, I mean, relationships is the classic one on that, isn't it?
Yeah.
If someone's in a relationship and I don't know, that person made off with all their money and they go, oh, I'm never doing that again. And then they get in a
But then it
relationship and-
happens again.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So I've gone from can we just totally forget a bad thing happening to us to what if we're not learning the lesson and we keep somehow the thing keeps repeating in our lives.
That is more complicated than the last one.
I'm sorry.
No, it's good. It's good.
See, I've been thinking about this stuff now.
Yeah, completely. As strange as it can sound, sometimes there's something from that situation that we get.
Right.
It gives us something. So not all the time, but sometimes people will repeat a pattern because there's something in that pattern that, albeit, I can never remember the right term for this. Is it negative reinforcement, isn't it? With children, where, you know, every time they come up and say something hurts, you give them a chocolate bar and yes, it keeps them quiet, but then in the future they find themselves addicted to chocolate because, you know, let's face it, life can be difficult, and every time it is, they reach for chocolate.
I know someone that's happened to with sweets.
Yeah, and it does. And it's a kind of similar thing, whereas there's something in that pattern that's fulfilling a need. So in that situation, one of the things you would look at is trying to find out what need going through that cycle is fulfilling, because then you can work with that part of that person, change, give it more choices. Like, well, let's work at fulfilling that need, but in a way that's more beneficial to you. Quite often, the key to change within ourselves and within other people is addressing the need. And some of our needs we find amazing ways of meeting, and other ways it can get a bit warped and twisted along the way, depending on life. So quite often, trying to address what need is this behavior fulfilling for you, which, depending on the situation, can be a tricky question to ask.
Yeah.
And some people will kind of take it on board and go, and other people might kind of not be willing to go there, and maybe even get a bit defensive over that. But that,
I'm going to be going for like the next few weeks, I think, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and you know what? For most people, it's not a conscious.
Well, that's the thing. I'm not consciously aware of what
why.
it is.
Yeah. But it could be that pattern of behavior, our behaviors develop to fulfill our needs. You think about a baby, it wants to eat. It hasn't got many choices on what it can do at the moment in its first few weeks, but it can make a noise. And it discovers that making that noise fulfills that initial need of, and that's what we do. So quite often there is a need in there, but quite often, if it was a conscious need, a conscious awareness, then we'd be, because human beings are really good at solving conscious problems, we would go, I'm doing this because of A and B, and that always gets me to C, and now I don't want to go to C anymore. So how can I do this in a different way that, although that need's been met, I end up going to D instead? But when it's unconscious, that's when things like self-hypnosis, having kind of done the self-hypnosis, things like using a pendulum, or even just going into self-hypnosis, setting up a session and saying, I'm going into self-hypnosis, I'm going to go in for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, just as long as it takes for my unconscious mind to reveal to me the need that this behavior is being fulfilling in a safe and comfortable way. Because obviously, you know, you don't want to kind of go, yes, bring it on, tell me what this is about, and kind of, poof, you know, you want to be gentle with yourself. So you can use self-hypnosis that way. You could even use meditation that way, and just go into meditation with that. I'm going into meditation to gain insight into why I repeat this. What is the need that this fulfills? I mean, self-work like that's invaluable. You find that need, and then you can go, once you know that need, you can go, okay, that may or may not make sense, but I get it. What can I do that's going to fulfill that need? That's not that. Or alternatively, you might go, I don't need to fulfill that need anymore. And now I know what it is. I know I can put it down. And sometimes just realizing what it is enough to change the behavior.
That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to my world. I love it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute
These
pleasure.
are the kinds of things that I think about at 5 a.m. when Dewey wakes me up to be fed.
Yeah. This is a more food for thought there. Then. Fabulous. And any other questions? Any other? Wonderful. Anyway,
Thank you
have a
very
wonderful rest of the Sunday and a great week. Hopefully see you Wednesday evenings, and do feel free to, because I want to try and the I Meditate Facebook group. I'm aware I've not put so much time into that recently, bar sequencing in the lessons that we all started off with, which I'm going to keep doing. But I want to build up a bit more interest in there. So if you've enjoyed it, do feel free to kind of make a comment or two about it in there if you'd like. You don't have to, but that would be lovely.
I'm going to send you some links to some groups. I think you should be in these groups, and because these are support groups for people with anxiety issues.
Oh, okay,
right?
Yeah.
And I think they need you in their groups, Rob.
Okay, yeah, no, send them across. Okay, yeah, no, send me those links. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah, get you some more business. and some less worried people in the world. It's got to be a good thing.
It's always got to be a good thing. Always got to be a good thing. Fab. Have a great rest of the day. My one thing now to do is watch the Formula One.
Yay!
It's going to be a good one. Today is going to be a good one.
Enjoy.
Yeah, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Sally. Bye.